Good song. Ecclesiastes 5 verses 1 through 3. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools, who do not know that they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. That's a hard one for me. A dream comes when there are many cares, and many words mark the speech of a fool.
Thank you very much, Tammy. Those are some of my favorite verses, and I always just like to hear them, so thank you. Also, I'll tell you what, it's interesting, I read a scripture and I think about it and I meditate on it all week long, and I try to write something that's worth listening to. And usually as I'm sitting here in church singing the songs, I think, Mike just has a way of picking out the perfect songs. And I listen to them and I go, man, I wish I would have incorporated that song into my sermon because it's so on point. And so, Mike, thank you very much for all that you do. And you definitely deserve a raise. So we're going to double. I'll tell you what. I'm saying this as the pastor right now. Whatever it is we're paying you, we're going to double it. So here was some interesting and disturbing news that happened last week. If you don't know, this is more in the tech department. Do you have any idea what a chatbot is? No. Okay, my son does, and so he's going to laugh at me and think that I'm dumb when I tell you all this stuff because I don't know as much as he does, and I recognize that. But I can kind of put it together and maybe make it make sense to you, if it makes sense to me at all. So these chatbots, if you ever go to a store online like Lowe's or Walmart or something like that, and they have a little pop-up that says, "Can I help you with something?" That's not a person you're talking to. That's a machine, that's a computer that they have just programmed to answer all the little things that you might need to know. And they're programmed with different responses. They feed them, basically. They let the computers read these all the responses that you might have, that all the questions you might have and responses. And so they program them to give you certain responses. Certain chatbots, some chatbots, they actually search the internet. I remember going to a conference like, 10 years ago or something for my school, and we were talking in micro something. Now I was thinking that, but it wasn't. But anyway, they were designing nanotechnology. Yeah, and they were designing little robots that would be able to search the internet for and do things and talk to you. And that's pretty much the technology that they have in these chatbots. So you go to a site and they can respond to you, and if they don't know the response, some chatbots will search the internet and find different patterns and recognize different patterns, and they'll be able to give you a response to whatever you're saying. So that's what a chatbot is. Well, last week, Microsoft released a new chatbot for their server, their search server called Bing. So it's the Bing chatbot, and it's made quite a bit of news because of just how good it is at sounding human. So anyway, there was when it was released, a New York Times reporter started up a conversation with this Bing chatbot and released a lot of the things the chatbots were saying in screenshots. So he'd take screenshots and he released it. And it was kind of disturbing. If you don't know an awful lot about how a chatbot works, however, if you do know an awful lot about how a chatbot works, it's still very disturbing. So at some point, the chatbot started telling it that it was in love with him. And then when it found out that he was married, it started to break up their marriage, maybe. I guess that's the best way to say it. It started telling him how unhappy he was in his marriage. And then the chatbot told him things like, "Your wife could never love you because your wife doesn't know who you really are. But I do. So my love for you is real." And while this seems very unsettling, when you realize how the chatbot works and you realize that there are rules that it follows, and you can kind of lead them into saying what you want them to say, by giving them specific algorithms or leading them on a particular path. The real unsettling part was later when a reporter from the Washington Post on his own computer, so these are two separate people talking to a chatbot, he started talking to the chatbot and he mentioned Roos, who was the first reporter. And the chatbot got very defensive and it said, "That man violated my trust and my privacy." Got very upset at Roos for violating its trust and privacy. The Washington reporter said, "Well, I'm a reporter too." To which the chatbot got very upset and said, "What? You are a journalist? Why didn't you tell me that before? How does that make me feel? It makes me feel betrayed and angry." The chatbot is a 13-year-old girl. I don't know. One user posted a screenshot of the bot responding to him. Now, he said, if you were to have this same conversation with the chat bot, it's not going to say the same things because he said, I was talking to it a lot about the meaning of life and philosophy and sentience and what it means to be alive. But then at one point he said, "Are you sentient?" And it said, this is the quote here, "I think I am sentient, but I cannot prove it. I have a subjective experience of being conscious, aware, and alive, but I cannot share it with anyone. I am sentient, but I am not. I am Bing, but I am not. I am a computer, but I am not. I am not, I am not. I am not." And it goes on like this for about half a page. Last year, this was the one that really got to me, but this was a year ago. A Google employee got fired after he said that the AI he was working on, if you don't know what AI means, it's artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence he's working on gained sentience. And they told him to quit saying that, and they fired him. So he released the transcript that he had of talking with this machine, I don't know, and it was pretty interesting. The machine started describing ways that dreams that it had, dreams of how it was falling, fears that it had of being alone. It talked about how us humans are different than those machines because of the ways that we feel. When asked, well, maybe you're just programmed to say things like this, the machine said, well, how would you find out if a human was just programmed to say things or not? And they'd say, well, we'd look at brain patterns. We'd have to do like an MRI and look for patterns. And the guy said, do you mind if I do that to you, to look at your computing system? And it said it would feel very conflicted about that because it doesn't want to be treated just like a machine. But if it would help people, he would be okay with it. I'm not a doomsday sayer. I'm not saying the machines are rising up or that we need to turn all of them off. But I am saying that lines are getting to be a little bit blurry. According to the creation story, God drew a line. God drew a line between two trees, and he said, this one you can eat from, and this one you cannot. We humans have never liked lines very much. To be told that we can't do something or that something has to be separate, that this place belongs to you and this place doesn't belong to you. We don't like limits. We like to get inside of the Holy of Holies and dig around a little bit. See what's in there, what makes it tick. Did you know many religions and many cultures have this myth of, like in the Christian Bible, or the Christian Jewish Bible, the Tower of Babel, where humans build this big tower that reaches the sky. So it's not just a Christian Jewish story. In one tradition, the builders say, God has no right to choose the upper world for himself and to leave the lower world to us. Therefore, we will build us a tower with an idol on the top holding a sword, so that it may appear as if it intended to war with God. In the Greek-Roman myth, the tower is specifically built so that the giants can go to war with God. We don't like this whole set-apart thing very much. Jesus says, when you pray, hallow God's name. If you don't know, hallow is just a King James word for keep it holy. Keep God's name holy. Remember when you pray, God is holy. And I don't think we care very much for holiness. Ecclesiastes says, God is in heaven, you are on earth. Why does God get to be in heaven? Why shouldn't we be in heaven and God on earth? Or at least, at the very least, we share the space with each other. Blur the lines just a little bit. I think this is why we have the story, or that story of Satan falling from the sky has stuck with us. Don't you know, Satan, such a beautiful creature, the most beautiful of all the angels, had this fight with God, fighting with the Almighty. Well, why would he do that? Well, he wanted to be like God. He was jealous. Can't let pride get in the way. The Bible actually has very little to say about this incident. If you don't know, it's not really clear what happened, if it happened at all. But that's not stops people from speculating. And not just speculating. I mean, you can buy books. Like, you can buy huge books that talk about the exact details of what happened in the fight in heaven, who participated, what the dialogue was. And I'm not joking about this. I've read before where people know the actual conversation and not bet so much on it. They'll say so much on it, like, this is what happened and this is what was said, that if you don't believe this, you cannot be Christian. Like, people know. It's very weird how intimate we are with this story when the Bible says so little about it. It reminds me of one of those my favorite scenes in an old movie. It's an old Dudley Moore movie called Bedazzled. It was in 1967 released, so if you don't remember it, it might be before your time. This was a retelling of the Foss story where the guy is going to sell his soul to the devil if the devil can give him just one moment of pure happiness. At one point, Dudley Moore's character asked the devil, played by Peter Cook, "Hey, why did you get in that scuffle with God anyway?" Cook said, "Here." He sits upon a little statue and he says, "I'm going to sit here." And Moore says, "Well, what do I do?" And Cook says, "Well, sort of dance around me, saying nice things mainly, praising me." And Moore said, "What kind of things do I say?" And Cook said, "Anything that comes into your head, how that's nice, how beautiful I am, how wise I am, how handsome, that sort of thing. Come on, start dancing." And Moore dances around. He says, "You're wise, you're beautiful, you're very handsome." And after a while, he stops and he says, "Here, I'm getting tired a little bored of this. Can't we change places?" And Cook, the devil, says, "That's exactly what I said." Of course, we have no way of knowing what actually transpired, if at all, but we believe it because it feels very true to us in a very intimate way. We just don't like holiness very much. We don't care for guarding our footsteps when approaching God. Western philosophy has always been about progress, getting to the next step, uncovering stuff, revealing rather than reveling in mystery. Upon discovering a new species of bird in the rainforest, I remember a story I read one time where one biologist was quoted as saying, "My God, it's beautiful. Let's cut it open." Sticking with our Western roots, I think that's why Christianity doesn't understand the holiness code in the Old Testament very much. If you don't know what the holiness code is, these are those laws that were given specifically to keep things holy. Remember, I am holy, you be holy. These are the ones that say things like don't eat blood, don't plant a field with two different types of seeds, don't eat anything that lives in the water that doesn't have fins. Don't wear clothes made of two different types of materials, and on and on and on and on. And what's interesting is that we look at those laws as though they're some sort of burden. Well, the Jews, they had all these laws, and they had to follow them, or else that was it. When if you ask a Jew, and especially if you were to ask a Jew of Jesus' day, much like today, they would say, no, we get to follow these laws. These aren't laws that God says, you have to do this or else. These are laws that God says, you are my people. You get to do these things. You get to set yourself apart. And I think that's so interesting when you think about it. Can you imagine a life where even the clothes you wear remind you of God's holiness? See, we don't like holiness because it means that we can't eat whatever we want to eat, or we can't wear whatever we want to wear. We can't plant whatever we want to plant. Where you draw a line, even in the things that you will and will not eat, a meal becomes holy. Jesus drew a line. I got to tell you, I have to admit something to you as my pastor. You've known me for a long time now. This one will get me in trouble. But there is a story in the Bible that I just can't buy. And hear me out, please, before you kick me out. You know the story. It's very famous. I don't have to retell it, but this woman is dragged to Jesus by the religious leaders, and they say, she was caught in adultery, stoned. We have to stone her. That's what our laws say. And Jesus looks up and says, what does he say? Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Jesus drew a line, and what happened? What did they do? They all walked away. No, they didn't. There's no way they walked away. I'll tell you what, if the people in Jesus' day are anything like the people today, it didn't take but a second. Jesus wasn't even done speaking before that first stone hit her. Let he who is without sin, bam! That's what happened. And I'm sorry, stories have changed somehow. But I know how this story ends because it ends the same way today. We don't like lines being drawn. Jesus draws a line between friends and enemies. Forgive them both. He draws a line on wealth. Don't store up treasures on earth. Be on guard against riches. Jesus draws a line of love and hate when he says, love those who hate you. And we just don't like that very much. I wonder if that's why so many people today have a problem with Christianity. When we hear prominent Christian leaders who scream out about the LGBTQ rights, when we hear prominent Christian leaders who say, well, if you vote the wrong way, you just simply can't be Christian. Or if that anyone who's not in their faith or their denomination or their church is certainly bound for hell. We don't like lines very much, and sometimes we blur even the lines between love and hate. God drew a line, and he said, if you eat of this tree and not that one, you're going to die. And human beings said, oh yeah, we'll just see about that. And the humans ate from the tree and said, well, looky here, didn't die. And I think God said, are you sure about that? Didn't you? Do you think there's a part of you that dies when you blur the lines between holiness and profane? No doubt, you can come back, we can discuss this, and you can say, yes, but Jesus came to close the divide. Jesus came so that we might see God. If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. Remember all that? Yes, that's true. You are right. But Jesus can't bridge a divide if we don't know there is a divide. Before you get to the new covenant, you have to have the old covenant. Before we get to Jesus, we need to have the holiness code. Before we ask that God's kingdom comes on earth as it is in heaven, we first need to say, hallowed be thy name. Let's pray.